Hey, welcome back, Iron Revival. Here we are. There's been a lot going around, and a lot of times people talk about, the swing and the two arm swing and the one arm swing, and they're the same. It's just the same. You just use one less arm. I don't know if that's necessarily true. In fact, I'm almost positive it's not true. Roger, can you elaborate a little bit more on that?
Well, I think I can. So we're the idea that coaches are putting out there. We both come across it in recent days, recent weeks, and have actually dealt with some people who had a bit of insecurity about their swing and some of their other ballistic movements based on this idea that the both swing types, one and two arm, should be identical. All the form points are going to be the same. The only difference is you use one arm versus two. I think the reason ultimately why we're making this and why we're talking about it is for precisely to deal with the situation that arose, is that here was somebody who had a really solid swing. He was good. He had no problems. Yet he had it in his head that he needed to fix it. And he was doing he was doing all kinds of maneuvers to minimize the rotation that was going on, that ultimately needed to go on. And in the process, he was making his swing weaker and was actually on the verge of causing himself potentially an injury, some back pain, because rather than going with the rotation that was natural, he was fighting it. So the reason why we want to call this out is coaching matters. Your impression of a movement matters. So we just want to get on the record and state definitively that a one and a two arm swing have some similar form checkpoints. It's okay to want the spine to remain more or less neutral. Okay, it's never going to remain neutral. It's not possible, but to an observable degree, we want to make sure that there's no, elaborate flexion and extension. We're probably going to have a similar motion at the hips and at the knees. You can cue neck position and things like that. But beyond that, the moves are very different. And, we want to talk about, one, why they're different, why they have to be different. So let's just kind of go through a little visualization. So, mentally get in your swing stance. You've got your kettlebell in two hands, and you're going back into the hike to prepare for your first swing. Now, in that position, both of your arms are going back in between your legs, both of them. Okay, they're going to the same place. Now execute the swing mentally. Your swing is now going to end pretty much directly in front of your chest. Okay, it's going to be center line. Okay, that's your two arm swing. Now your one arm swing, you're going to have a similar setup, but as soon as you bring that bell back through to the hike, you aren't bringing both arms through the legs anymore. One of your arms is going to go outside of your legs. Okay, now I've never seen anybody where this wasn't the case. Maybe if you have, perfect physical dimensions for it, it's possible. Now, it's going to change once load happens anyway. It's still going to be different. But for the most part, people have to rotate the torso to get an arm outside of the legs. So if you take somebody like me, I'm pretty wide. Okay, so the distance between my shoulders is more substantial than someone who's thinner. Plus, I don't have very big legs, so I don't have a particularly wide stance. I've got a lot of weight in my torso. I'm going to have to shift in order to deal with that weight, in order to deal with the fact that I'm a bit wider. I'm going to have to move my sternum off the center line just to get my off arm. So let's say I'm swinging with my right hand. I'm going to have to move my sternum toward the side that is going to bring the arm back. Unless, of course, we're not going to use that other arm and we're going to keep it on our hip, which I've never heard anybody in the kettlebell world really advocate. That's a good idea.
The zombie arm style right there.
Yeah, so if we're using that other arm to to drive. And even if you are keeping the hand on the arm, that's another significant difference. You're still going to open up. So the need to move the arm off center is going to necessitate some rotation. Now, when we're going through and we're executing the swing, if you were to hold up your hands where your double swing is going to end, right? And then you're going to hold up your arm where your single swing is going to end, you're going to notice that your single swing is going to be more toward the outside of your body. It's going to go in line with the shoulder. Now, again, depending upon how wide your shoulders are, this is going to cause more or less of a diagonal. So if you draw like put a dot in your junk, okay, and then put a dot on the end of your fist in your one arm swing, you're going to see that there's going to be a diagonal there. Again, the width of the torso, the width of the shoulders is going to dictate how much rotation needs to happen in order to get the kettlebell from here back to the middle. So based on just the simple movement objective of the swing, that it's going to a different place, based on the fact that you're not going to allow both arms to go in the same place when you're setting up, means that path is going to be different. Some rotation has to happen. And now that we have this diagonal, right? And now we have this kettlebell. So let's say, even we're going light. Let's say I'm going 24 kilo for a one arm swing. Still, that's, we've got 50 plus pounds plus the acceleration of the motion, all the gravity. There's a pretty significant force that is not coming straight down. If I'm doing a right swing and it comes straight down, it's going to go right into my leg. So I need to use that diagonal. When I have all of that force coming back down at a diagonal toward the center of my legs, rotation is going to happen. The question is, am I going to be ready for it, and am I going to be prepared for it? And it's a question of degree. Some rotation is going to happen. It's a question of how much is okay. Are we okay with this, or do we think it's too much? Do we think it's excessive?
Yeah. And that being said, like how do we know how much is enough? When is enough enough? Do we have to wait till we're face down on the floor, or do we cut it off?
Well, a few guidelines, and this is where we where we get into the art of coaching. These aren't things that we can put on a piece of paper that are going to be for everyone. So one, I would say, what is your training objective? In certain movements, I've seen very, very viable, let's say a 1.5 stance with an accentuated rotation in the swing, really just kind of working those lines, those diagonals in a really, really effective athletic way. And there was a lot of intentional rotation there. So in that particular situation, this was someone who was really trying to accentuate it and use it. But I think the real question is your goal to go with the rotation, or is it to resist the rotation? Now, even if you try to resist the rotation completely, so what people call anti-rotation, you're not going to be able to do it, not entirely. But if that's your goal, then that's fine. Then your goal, what I would say, is go through your rehearsal pattern. Okay, so go unloaded through your swing. You want to aim to have your torso rotate only as much as necessary, unloaded. Now, obviously, load changes everything, and there's going to be some variance. But that would be my starting point. If you have somebody who, and I think we've talked about this before, is if you can get a good logo or something on your shirt, okay, and you start to see that logo shifting to a certain degree just by bringing the arm back unloaded, then you know for damn sure the same thing's going to happen when it is loaded. This is just a simple matter of geometry. Your arms can't pass through your body. So rehearsal is going to be key. So that's one thing we're looking for, and matching our training goals. So if we're trying to keep it as still as possible, then we're going to use our rehearsal to dictate that. If we're trying to maximize it, then again, you probably would also do rotation. You would probably also do some rehearsal in order to figure that out. The second thing that I would really look at is where are you getting the rotation? Okay, is it in a controlled way? Are you moving through the hip, Are you moving, or is, your upper spine torquing on your lower spine? If that's the issue, then I would say that that's problematic. But if it's moving through the hip, if it's moving in a well-coordinated way, through the hip, if the rib cage and the pelvis are staying on top of each other, right? But the whole thing is twisting as a unit, and maybe you're getting some extra rotation, through the shoulder, but the shoulder's not disconnecting, then I would be fine with those markers. And the third thing I would look at is it roughly the same on both sides? Now, that's not always going to be the case. You could have two hips that are, different shapes. The femoral necks can change angles. That's not terribly common, so I wouldn't just assume that's always the case, but it is possible. So, if you're looking at the left side and it's more or less straight up and down, and then the right side, it just has a ton of rotation, I would look into that. I would look, and that's when you go back to your rehearsal and you get your slow-mo video out. And sometimes you'll actually see people will be more over one of their hips, and that's why they have to rotate more. In a situation like that, then I would say, okay, the discrepancy between the two sides really warrants us looking a little closer at this. But again, it is not anything that's inherently bad in the movement. It may be inherently bad in that context because people don't have the same access to both sides of their body. And they may not need it, but these are things that we're looking at. But the take home here is that the one arm swing and the two arm swing are fundamentally different in a lot of ways. The muscles are going to contract differently. The movement objective is different. You have different, the arm needs to change position. There's a lot going on that is different. So to say that this needs to be just like that is misleading, and in some cases can cause some problems.
Understandable. Those are all really solid, and I think, even if you take each point apart, everybody could probably benefit from examining into all those areas. One thing that really stuck out is somebody who was getting into one side over the other was using that slow motion video, and then really learning how to get back into the hip that wasn't getting back into, and it solved a lot of problems and achy pains that I was having from the rotation of actually over rotating and finding that stuff. And ultimately one of the great things that you said was, if your rib cage and your hips are in the stack or in line with each other and you're rotating and it's all together, then, it might look a little different, but it's probably okay.
There's something else that actually occurs to me, and this is kind of a subtlety. It's hard to see, and generally, when you've been coaching for a while, you can pick up on these things. But I do notice something with one arm swings, especially when there's a pull, when people are pulling with the arm, and you'll kind of have this whole Saturday Night Fever thing, and the whole move will basically generate a force that would, if it were to continue, it would go out that way. Okay. Yeah. The kettlebell would be way over here. And that is usually a product of arm pulling, and the whole thing gets torqued. What we're looking for is, yes, there's going to be rotation, but the kettlebell is still going to come down from the hips and be projected forward. The rotation is going to be brought about by the bell coming down, not by pulling the bell up. And that's a really important point. And if all goes well, then the kettlebell should just kind of float out in front of that one arm rather than having this trajectory. And that's usually indicative. I see that when I work with intermediate, usually people. It's not usually something I see in beginners, but people who have a side-to-side discrepancy, or people who have low back pain, they're usually pulling from the upper body because the hip just isn't there. It's not doing what it needs to do.
Yeah, that's a really great point. Thanks for sharing that. Anything else that we want to add to this little video today?
No, because then it'll make it too long for people to watch. But you could pull this thing apart and find hundreds, maybe even thousands of differences if you're looking at individual muscles. There's some studies that have been done that show that both swings are fundamentally different. It's going to change your physiological response, your anatomical response. There's a lot going on that's different. So to say the two moves are identical it's just wrong.
Yeah, it's a little
Probably not.
closed-minded. You know, I mean, everybody's body is different, right? You know, as you explained earlier in this video, your body's different than mine. The angle you're gonna have to take is gonna be different than the angle I have to take, and so on and so forth. And I think those are good, solid points. I think we'll just go ahead and wrap that up. And everybody, you know what to do. Sign the thing, do the stuff, follow us along, and stay strong.